Sorry about that. It must have given you a fright. We are coming up on Halloween, and speaking of creepy ghouls...
Today I want to clear up one of the most common misunderstandings I run into when I'm out filming.
Goodness, perhaps he's seen the light. Maybe he now realises that auditing is not a legal activity, and he's going to now go through all the points he's misunderstood over the years. Good for you, PJ Audits. This is exciting. Let's watch.
What's all this in?
It's a video camera, mate.
Huh?
It's a video camera.
Right, so what, you videoing?
Well, at the moment, you.
Well, you know that's illegal, didn't you?
Why is it illegal?
Because one, you haven't asked for permission.
Don't need permission.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't. And what's two?
You need to turn that off.
No, I don't, mate, honestly.
I'm glad he's included that, because that is a typical PJ Audits technique, which involves picking on people. What he's doing is deliberately turning up somewhere where ordinary working class people are earning a living, knowing that it's quite likely some of them won't like being filmed and will challenge him about it, and he knows that most ordinary working people are not going to be well versed in the law, especially something as niche as public photography law, so they're likely to make mistakes and get the law wrong when they object to what he's doing. His trick here is that instead of addressing the objection itself and showing some understanding towards people, he wants to portray them as ignorant and act like he's standing up for our rights. It's an ugly trait that he has. He stands there laughing at a man who never asked him to turn up and film and just doesn't want to be filmed. He could have said, "OK, I understand, I'll just blur you out of the final footage, don't worry about it." Instead, he just stands there laughing at him and turns him into an object of ridicule for his fans, who ignore the bigger picture and just assume that the working man is trying to stop PJ Audits exercising his rights. They don't stop to ask what PJ Audits is doing standing outside the entrance of an ordinary factory or warehouse recording people, and why he can't be more considerate towards people, or why he keeps doing this over and over again in video after video, and what the point of it is. The reality is that there are literally tens of millions of photography and vlogging channels on YouTube that have few or no issues with public photography and can go about it without all this drama and conflict. That's because they're considerate of people. PJ Audits is contemptuous of people. Anybody who has watched this channel for any length of time and paid attention will know that public photography is perfectly legal and there is no requirement to seek anyone's consent. But also the auditors are not undertaking a legal activity. In most cases, and I think this is the case with PJ Audits most of the time, they are engaged in harassment. So this working man's objection is valid, and the sneering and ridicule that PJ Audits tries to cast on him is misplaced. It's not this man who misunderstands the law, it is PJ Audits.
You have done so you have just assaulted me.
Have I assaulted you?
Because I have expressly forbidden you.
And you think that's assault?
Yes, it is.
How's that assault?
Well, go check your legal.
I don't need to.
You do.
I don't.
You really do.
To assault you, I've got to touch you.
You don't.
Yeah, I do.
You don't. You can take my image without my implied consent.
Just because the man may be mistaken about the law, that does not mean it's right for PJ Audits to ignore his objections. This man is not a lawyer, he's an ordinary working man, or he appears to be. He can't be expected to know the law, and PJ Audits is well aware of this and is exploiting it and manipulating his own viewers. PJ Audits is just a bully, and this situation we're looking at now could again be harassment, and it may well be that this man knows what PJ Audits is going to do with the footage and rightly objects. So what if he calls it assault instead of harassment? The objection is still worth considering.
What I want to do is talk about what the law actually says about filming in public places in the UK.
Oh good, so you're now going to show us that you've been wrong all along.
Now this video isn't just for regular viewers, it's for everybody, security staff, managers and members of the public who sometimes come out and tell me I can't film.
That's interesting. you're setting yourself up as an expert who can teach others. One of the things you will notice in the video description underneath all of my videos is that I include references to the law to support what I say in a video. This could include links to statutory law, regulations, case law and policy documents, or whatever is relevant to the video. Looking at the video description beneath this video by PJ Audits, there is no reference material to support anything he is about to say. No links to statutes, regulations, case law or policy. Nothing. This man calls himself an auditor, which means he purports to audit the performance of other people in their work, especially with regard to public photography laws, so I would expect him to have a solid grasp of the relevant law and to provide references to the law to support whatever he tells us in the video. Unfortunately, that seems lacking in the video description, but maybe he will mention all the relevant laws verbally.
Okay, if you stand in a public place, this means a pavement, a public right-of-way, or any area where you're lawfully allowed to be, you're legally allowed to film anything you can see with your eyes.
That is correct. There are some exceptions, such as sites protected for national security purposes, but I can understand why you might not want to go into that in a video such as this. Nobody is disputing that public photography is legal and you can film anything you can see from a public highway, as a general principle. I for one would not want that to change.
Doesn't matter what it is, if it's a factory, a shop, people, if you can see it and you're in a public place, you are legally allowed to photograph and film it.
Again, I'm happy with that, but he's just giving us the general picture, what the position is in principle. There is more to it. I'm sure he'll cover it.
Now, a lot of people say, you need permission to film our factory, or you need permission to film our shop, or you need permission to film me. No, you don't. You do not need permission to film anything.
Again, I agree with that as a generalisation and as a matter of principle. Obviously, he's ignoring the exemptions that would make it illegal, but again, I can forgive that because he concerns himself with business and industrial sites anyway, some of which might be protected, but typically won't be. I'm happy to keep it simple.
They seem to think that you need a licence to do this. They seem to think that you need to justify a reason why you're there, why you're taking photographs and why you're videoing.
In law, a photographer or vlogger doesn't need those things.
You don't. There's no law that forbids filming something just because a company or a person doesn't want to be filmed. If you can see it, you can film it.
Again, as a general principle, I agree.
One of the arguments that they generally put up is it's private property. That doesn't matter. If you can see it, you can film it.
Again, in general principle, I agree.
The important bit is, even if that property is private, which most of them are, and you're standing in a public place, the filming is still lawful. It's the location of the camera operator that matters.
Again, as a general principle, this is right.
Not what the camera's pointing at. It doesn't matter at all. It's where you are when you're taking that video and where you're taking that photograph. If it's public, it's lawful. Now, this part is for the security staff and managers and everybody else that like to come out and challenge you when you're filming. Security staff don't have any legal powers over you. If you're a member of the public and you're in a public place, security staff have nothing over you.
Again, I agree.
They're not the police, although one or two seem to think that they are. But if you're in a public place, security has no powers over you. If you walk onto their property, they can ask you to leave. That's fair comment. But if you're in a public place, no powers at all. They can't demand your details. They might ask for your details, and it's up to you whether you want to give them your details or not. Personally, generally speaking, I don't mind giving them my first name, but other than that, that's it. They can't delete your footage or demand that you delete your footage. Well, they can, but you don't have to. And that's the kicker. They all come along, or there's quite a few come along and say, delete that footage. I don't want your video in our factory. You do not have to delete your footage. They cannot prevent you from recording from public land.
Again, as general comment, I agree with all that.
They can't do it. They try, they stand in your way, they wave their arms around, they come and be a pain in the butt sometimes, but they cannot prevent you from recording from public land. All they can do is ask politely, which some do, I've got to admit, some do, some don't, but they cannot enforce any.
Again, with regard to security guards or other staff of a business, I have no argument with any of that.
Another common attempt to stop your videoing is quoting GDPR. Now, I will be going into GDPR in another video in a little while, but at the moment, just to say that GDPR regulates organisations, I'll put my teeth in a minute, that store and process personal data. It does not apply to individuals filming in a public place. It just doesn't.
It does. It applies to you, PJ Audits, and it applies to every single auditor. I'm not saying it applies to every video that auditors make. Obviously, the relevance of data protection is going to be situational. But in general, data protection does apply to all auditors. First, Recital 18 of the UK GDPR states that only natural persons processing personal data as a purely personal or household activity, and thus with no connection to a professional or commercial activity, are exempt from data protection. That exemption clearly does not apply to a YouTube channel that broadcasts footage by you, stood, as you say, on a public highway in a public place. There is absolutely nothing in the data protection laws and regulations that says data protection only applies to organisations. It applies to anyone processing personal data, whether a limited company, a charitable trust, or a natural individual. Anybody with legal personality, in other words. And by the way, it does in principle apply whether or not that processing is monetised or otherwise carried out for commercial purposes. So even an auditor with a channel that has not been monetised is still considered subject to data protection. PJ Audits, like all auditors, is also required to register as a data controller with the ICO. The requirement is in Regulation 2 of the Data Protection Charges and Information Regulations 2018.
It just doesn't.
You telling me, it just doesn't, isn't very convincing. It may be good enough for auditors, but I require a bit more. I think I'm going to rely on the law, not on you saying to me, it just doesn't, because your mate has told you that. Even if you are an auditor, I still need evidence for your interpretation of the law, and it seems to me that you're just a bloke sat in a kitchen, and a bloke sat in a kitchen doesn't override Parliament and government ministers and the ICO and the courts, even if he does have a funny hairdo.
Even though some of these GDPR wizards seem to think that it does, it doesn't. Not at all.
What's a GDPR wizard? The fact that he refers to this area of the law as GDPR is a clue that he doesn't really understand what he's talking about. The relevant law isn't just contained in the UK GDPR, there's also the Data Protection Act 2018, and I've mentioned to you the Data Protection Charges and Information Regulations 2018. It's all a bit more complicated than this man seems to think, and it just doesn't, spoken in an East Midlands accent, won't cut the mustard, I'm sorry to say.
So here's the bottom line. If you're in a public place, you can legally film anything you can see. Nobody, not a manager, security, or anybody like that, has any legal authority to stop you from filming or taking photographs. They can ask politely, but in saying that, you can legally turn around and say, no, thank you, or I'm going to carry on filming, or I'm going to carry on taking my photos. You have no authority over me. If I want to take photos or videos, I will do.
He's repeating what he told us earlier. Sounds like he's summing up now. Again, as general principle, I can agree with what he's saying.
So if you found this video useful, whether you're a viewer, a photographer, a videographer, or you work on a site, perhaps a security or a manager or something like that might be dealing with people going out filming your site, like me, yes, and some of my friends. Now you know a little bit about the law and what we can and can't do.
Do we? Well, I suppose it's true that he knows a little bit, and you know what they say about a little bit of knowledge. Of relevance to this is a previous video of mine, How Auditors Frame the Debate, because what PJ Audits is doing here is framing. I recommend you watch it. I consider it one of my best videos. What PJ Audits has just given us is an argument for photography and vlogging. The problem is, that's not what auditors do. Auditors are not photographers or vloggers. Well, technically they are in the sense that they use recording devices, but photography and vlogging is not their aim. Auditing is an astroturf trend in which a problem is invented and viewers are presented with a fictitious and distorted picture of reality, sometimes even involving inventing the law. The interactions you see are not natural, and the aim is to manufacture and provoke conflict and discord and present anyone who challenges the auditor in a way that is intended to humiliate that person and encourage viewers to ridicule them, and maybe even abuse and harass them, and leave negative reviews for the business they own or work for, and in some cases even report them to their employers or regulators in an effort to cost them their job. That's not photography or vlogging, that's not a legitimate activity. It is bullying and harassment. And what PJ Audits wants is for you not to realise this, and to just look on him and other auditors as innocent photographers, which is why his coverage of the law in that little talk he's just given was incomplete. Here are the criminal laws that affect auditing and make it illegal, and that he made no mention of. Harassment of a natural person, harassment of a corporate person, disorderly behaviour likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress, intentional use of threatening, abusive or insulting words or behaviour or disorderly behaviour to cause another person harassment, alarm or distress, aggravated trespass, being found in an enclosed yard for an unlawful purpose, common assault, assault by beating, persistent use of a public electronic communications network for the purpose of causing annoyance, inconvenience or needless anxiety to another, obstructing a constable, taking a photograph in a court building, taking a photograph within a prison without authorization, intercepting or broadcasting without permission a radio message intended for general reception, eliciting or publishing information likely to be of assistance to a terrorist. PJ Audits' argument reminds me a little of something called the Motte and Bailey fallacy, which is a form of argument and an informal fallacy where an arguer conflates two positions that share similarities, one modest and easy to defend, the Motte, and one much more controversial and harder to defend, the Bailey. The arguer advances the controversial position, but when challenged, insists that only the more modest position is being advanced. Upon retreating to the Motte, the arguer may claim that the Bailey has not been refuted because the critic refused to attack the Motte, or that the critic is unreasonable by equating an attack on the Bailey with an attack on the Motte. In the case of auditors like PJ Audits, the Motte is the pinnacle argument, photography is not a crime, and the Bailey is an argument for auditing. The Motte, photography, is what PJ Audits wants everybody to think he does. Meanwhile, the Bailey, auditing, is what he actually does. In his little talk, PJ Audits is arguing for the Motte. He doesn't mention anything about the Bailey. It's a fallacy by omission. Whether this is through ignorance and stupidity, and an example of a Dunning-Kruger effect in that he doesn't even realise what he's ignorant of, or it's just down to deceitfulness and he knows full well what he's doing, or it's some combination of these things, is unclear. It also has a touch of a false dilemma about it. What he's trying to do is make you think that anybody who disagrees with him must be unreasonable or ignorant, because, after all, who could disagree with photography in a public place? This is a false dilemma because there is a third position, which is my own position on this, which is that I completely support public photography rights, which is why I was able to agree with so much of what PJ Audits said when he was defending public photography. But here is the point. Auditing is not photography. It is bullying and harassment, and it is not legal. While we're on that point, I've noticed that PJ Audits is now mostly just re-uploading old auditing visits of his. It seems to me, if we go back to the Protection from Harassment Act, that this could be considered to be part of a course of conduct of harassment against those workers and business owners that he features in his videos. It's something to consider, and it's something that ought to be further explored by victims and the police. Now, these auditors and their fans will say that none of this really matters. They made money out of it, so even if they have to stop, they've still won. Well, here are my thoughts on that. Let me introduce you to something called group litigation. Roughly speaking, it's the equivalent in England of what Americans would call a class action, a way for multiple claimants, sometimes numbering in the hundreds or thousands of people, to seek collective redress through the courts. PJ Audits is one of the few auditors who has made serious money out of this, to the extent that he has boasted of how he bought a flat in Egypt out of his AdSense income. But I wonder if one day he may come to regret his actions, because you see, he has assets, including a house and the flat in Egypt, which means he's worth suing, which means that the archive he has on that channel of his, with all those videos in it, is actually a ticking time bomb. All it will take is an enterprising law firm willing to bring group litigation against both YouTube and those few auditors like PJ Audits who are of means, and then we'll see some fireworks. Then you'll have something entertaining to watch, and you never know, you might even be watching it on this channel. We shall see.